Good morning and welcome. Today, we gather to confront one of the most shocking and consequential events in recent American history, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was more than a political activist. He was a founder of Turning Point USA, a voice on college campuses, and a prominent figure in conservative politics. His life was dedicated to engaging young Americans, shaping conversations about freedom, faith, and the future of the United States. And yet, in one horrifying moment, that life was cut short. The breaking news stunned millions. Charlie Kirk had been assassinated. Initial reports spread quickly across social media, news outlets, and through word of mouth. For supporters, disbelief turned into grief. For critics, shock was coupled with uneasy reflection. Soon, details began to emerge. The suspect was identified. Arrests were made. Questions poured in. Why? Who was involved? Could it have been prevented? What does this mean for the country? The scene of the assassination became a symbol of national division, of escalating political tensions, and of the dangerous reality that words and debates were no longer confined to speech, but had now crossed the line into deadly violence. This broadcast is not just about recounting the details. It is about looking deeper at the investigation, the political fallout, the impact on free speech, and the legacy Charlie Kirk leaves behind. We begin with what we know, the facts of the crime itself, and how law enforcement responded in the immediate aftermath. In the days following the assassination, investigators moved quickly to identify and apprehend the suspect. According to FBI officials, the alleged shooter was living in Utah and shared a home with a partner who was in the process of gender transition. That partner ultimately cooperated with law enforcement, providing key messages and evidence that helped authorities zero in on the suspect. When confronted by his father, the shooter reportedly admitted to the crime and expressed suicidal thoughts. Rather than a willingness to face justice, it was only through the intervention of family members and a local minister that he was persuaded to surrender peacefully. The suspect was placed into custody at the Utah County Jail, awaiting formal charges. Prosecutors prepared to bring counts of murder, terrorism, and conspiracy. Investigators also traced his online activity. They uncovered Discord chats, gaming communities, and ideological conversations that hinted at radicalization. The threads of grievance, ideology, and moral absolutism, common traits and profiles of political assassins, were all present. But the investigation raised deeper questions. Was this an act of a lone wolf or part of a wider movement? Was the shooter animated by political ideology, personal instability, or both? And what role did the online ecosystem play in shaping his path toward violence? As investigators unraveled these details, the nation turned its attention to the broader meaning. Why had Charlie Kirk become a target? And what did this act of violence reveal about the growing tensions in American society? The political reaction was immediate and fierce. President Trump issued a statement praising law enforcement for their quick work, expressing pride in the FBI, and calling the assassination both senseless and evil. He later announced that Charlie Kirk would be posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the nation. Turning Point USA, the organization Kirk founded, announced that a massive memorial service would be held at State Farm Stadium in Arizona. Meanwhile, commentators debated the shooter's motives. Early online narratives tried to paint him as a supporter of the MAGA movement, but evidence quickly showed the opposite, that he was aligned with leftist ideology, and that his attack had been premeditated, connected to grievances about Kirk's views. Fox News and conservative outlets focused heavily on the cultural dynamics, the rise of political violence, the role of transgender identity in recent mass shootings, and the broader hostility toward Christian and conservative voices. Liberal outlets were more cautious, pointing to mental health, the dangers of online radicalization, and the need to avoid scapegoating communities. But across the spectrum, there was agreement on one thing. This was not just an attack on a man. It was an attack on the principle of free speech and on the safety of public debate itself. As media coverage intensified, another theme emerged: generational divides. Polls revealed that while older generations overwhelmingly rejected political violence, younger Americans, particularly Gen Z, were far more divided. Nearly half of them said political violence might be acceptable under certain conditions. That revelation sent shockwaves through commentators. Was America cultivating a culture where assassination was seen as a legitimate form of protest? If so, what future awaited the nation? The political fallout was not just about the shooter. It was about America itself, about where the country was headed, and whether this tragedy would be a turning point or another step into division. Charlie Kirk's assassination struck at the heart of America's cultural divide. For years, Kirk had made his mark by visiting college campuses, challenging progressive orthodoxy, and sparking debates about faith, freedom, and responsibility. His critics often called him polarizing. His supporters called him courageous. But no one doubted his influence. In the wake of his death, conversations about the shooter's ideology turned into broader cultural arguments. Conservatives pointed to an alarming pattern: multiple recent shooters identifying as transgender, raising questions about whether the pressures of transition, the use of hormone-altering drugs, or the influence of radical online subcultures might play a role. Progressives rejected those claims, warning against demonizing marginalized groups. They emphasized that political violence is not confined to any single ideology. Yet the cultural battle lines were clear. One side framed the assassination as the inevitable product of leftist radicalization, of professors radicalizing students, of rhetoric that labeled conservatives as fascists and threats to democracy. The other side framed it as the outcome of unchecked polarization, mental illness, and a toxic online environment. But beyond the talking points, ordinary Americans reacted with shock and fear. Parents worried about their children's safety on campuses. Churches prayed for the nation. And young people, many of whom had followed Kirk on TikTok or Instagram, began reevaluating their relationship to free speech and activism. Perhaps most striking was the global response. In London, tens of thousands gathered in his memory, holding posters of Kirk's face and chanting for free speech. For many in the UK, where speech restrictions are growing, Kirk became a symbol of resistance. In the United States, the cultural divide seemed sharper than ever. But one truth was undeniable: the assassination had struck a chord across generations and across borders. It was no longer just about Charlie Kirk. It was about the kind of world young people would inherit, one shaped either by persuasion or by violence. One of the most remarkable elements of the aftermath was a turn toward faith. Charlie Kirk had always been outspoken about his Christianity. He believed faith was central to the fight for freedom, and he often ended his speeches by pointing young people back to God. After his assassination, churches across the country reported an unexpected surge. People who had never attended before came through their doors, saying they were inspired by Kirk's example. Social media was filled with posts: "I like Charlie, but I wasn't really a Christian. I'm going to church tomorrow." For many, this was the most powerful tribute imaginable. Instead of rioting, instead of destruction, the response was worship. Kirk's widow, Erica, became a central figure in this moment. Known for her calm and faith-filled presence, she delivered a message that stunned even those close to her. Her grief had been transformed into a call for courage. Observers noted that, far from being silenced, she seemed ready to step into leadership herself, perhaps even to take up her husband's mantle. The Christian community embraced the tragedy as both a loss and a mission. Sermons across denominations spoke of martyrdom, of standing firm in faith, of the reminder that the struggle for truth often comes at the highest cost. As one pastor said, if you felt a strange burden in your heart for Charlie, even if you never met him, it is because you are part of the body of Christ. The assassination, then, was not only a political moment, it became a spiritual one, a moment that deepened the role of faith in America as public life. And that pointed thousands toward the very message Charlie Kirk spent his career defending. While the nation mourned, the world was also shifting. At the same time as the assassination, global tensions were escalating. NATO reported drone incursions from Russian into Polish and Romanian airspace, sparking fears of further escalation in Europe. President Trump declared his readiness to impose massive sanctions on Russia, but only if all NATO allies agreed to stop buying Russian oil. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, tensions soared after Israel launched a strike in Qatar targeting Hamas leaders. Critics called the move reckless, warning of destabilization. Supporters argued it was necessary to pressure Hamas into releasing hostages. Into this storm stepped Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who traveled to Israel to reassure allies and manage fallout. His task was delicate: maintaining solidarity with Israel, while calming Qatari anger over strikes on its soil. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, though domestic, reverberated abroad. For allies in Europe, It was another sign that America itself was unstable, that its internal divisions might weaken its global leadership. For adversaries like Russia and China, it was proof that America was distracted, vulnerable, and consumed by internal strife. Thus, the murder of one activist became a global signal. It raised questions about whether America could defend not only free speech at home, but democracy abroad. In an already unstable world, the assassination added one more tremor to a geopolitical landscape already on edge. 1 week after his death, the nation gathered to honor Charlie Kirk. At State Farm Stadium in Arizona, tens of thousands attended his celebration of life. Tributes poured in from across the political spectrum. Musicians paused concerts. Athletes honored him on the field. Even in the UK, rallies continued in his memory. President Trump delivered a eulogy, describing Kirk as like a son. He spoke of Kirk's brilliance, his passion for young people, and his refusal to be silenced. He formally awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, presenting it to Kirk's widow. Turning Point USA announced that in just 48 hours, they had received over 32,000 new requests to start chapters across the world. Proof that Kirk's mission was not ending, but expanding. Country music star Morgan Wallen paused his show to send prayers. Across campuses, students held candlelight vigils. Online, millions shared Kirk's videos, clips of his debates, and his sharp yet compassionate responses to opponents. The sports world, too, felt the ripple. NFL fans asked whether the league would honor Kirk, just as it had honored George Floyd. The question was not just about one man, but about whether the culture would recognize a conservative in the same way it had recognized figures aligned with the left. What stood out most, however, was a sense of unity, rare in today's polarized world. Supporters and critics alike admitted that no one should die for their beliefs. That political debate must not cross the line into violence. In that unity, however, brief was a glimpse of what America could be, and perhaps a glimpse of what Charlie Kirk would have wanted most. A nation where people could fiercely disagree, yet still defend each other's right to speak. Charlie Kirk's assassination was not just a tragic silencing of a voice. It was a moment that forced America to confront itself. Charlie's life was about ideas, about defending free speech, about challenging young minds, about standing firm for values he believed were timeless. Whether you agree with him or not, there's no denying that he built a movement. Turning Point USA began as a small organization on college campuses. By the time of his death, it had become one of the most influential youth movements in America, shaping debate across campuses, churches, and political arenas. But his assassination has raised bigger questions. Questions about political violence. Questions about freedom of speech. Questions about whether America can still resolve its deepest disagreements without bloodshed. As investigators piece together the shooter's motives, the discussion has shifted to something larger than one man. Commentators point to online radicalization, to the growing role of identity politics, to generational divides, to the role of media echo chambers. Some point to mental health, others to ideology. The truth is likely a mixture of all of these. Yet, amid the tragedy, something unexpected has emerged. A resurgence of unity, not complete, not perfect, but undeniable. Across the world, people gathered in Charlie's memory, not only to honor him, but to defend the principle he championed, that speech should not be silenced by force. We saw massive rallies in London where restrictions on free speech have grown. We saw tributes from musicians, athletes, and politicians who may not have agreed with all of Charlie's views but respected his courage to speak them. We saw tens of thousands of students sign up to continue his work, determined that his death would not mean silence. Even more powerful, many Americans turned to faith. Churches reported an influx of people who said they were inspired by Charlie's example. Instead of rioting, instead of burning cities, many chose prayer. That may be the most fitting tribute of all, because it was not revenge, but reflection. And this brings us to the ultimate lesson of this tragedy. Political violence can kill a person, but it cannot kill an idea. If anything, history shows us the opposite. It often amplifies it. From Abraham Lincoln to Martin Luther King Jr., from John F. Kennedy to global figures across centuries, assassinations create martyrs, and martyrs inspire movements. Charlie Kirk's death has become a reminder that democracy is fragile, that words matter, and that the way we treat each other in debate can determine the health of an entire nation. It is also a warning. A warning that if America continues down a path where assassination replaces argument, where violence replaces persuasion, the republic itself may not endure. But it is also an opportunity to renew the commitment to free speech, to prove that disagreement can exist without destruction, to live out the very principles Charlie fought for on campuses across the country. As we close this chapter, one question remains for every listener. What will you do with this moment? Will you allow the tragedy to be just another news cycle? Or will you take it as a call to speak more courageously, to listen more carefully, and to guard against the temptation of hate? Charlie Kirk is gone, but the fight for freedom of thought, for civil discourse, and for a nation where words are stronger than bullets, that fight is still here, and it belongs now to all of us. In the end, perhaps President Trump's words captured it best. Charlie didn't deserve this. He was a good person, but in many ways, he's bigger now because of what happened. And so, Charlie Kirk's story doesn't end with an assassin's bullet. It continues with every student who joins Turning Point, every person who dares to speak unpopular truths, and every citizen who believes that America's future must be decided by voices, not violence. That is his legacy. That is a lesson, and it is up to us to carry it forward.